It just never stops. And I want to play some video for you of Donald Trump doing what he keeps doing that is so harmful. And, we've talked about in a lot of past instances, the New Orleans massacre, natural disasters, Maui wildfires, the hurricanes, how when something terrible happens, it's particularly vile for people to dishonestly exploit that moment. It heightens how tragic a moment is when you have these political actors jumping in and just lying to politicize it. It's not that politicizing or making a political point surrounding a tragedy is always wrong, because sometimes political solutions could help to prevent crises. But to see people so willing to just spew out dishonesty when people's lives are being turned upside down and when a real tragedy is taking place, I will never understand it. Here's the latest example of that. As I'm sure you've been seeing, wildfires are ravaging Los Angeles and the greater Los Angeles area. And so much devastation. So what does Trump come out and do? Make false claims about Democratic leaders like Gavin Newsom to try to convince Californians that this is about Democrats. And that's who they should point the finger at. While you watch this, please do click the subscribe button. We'll go through these claims as we go along.
Do you believe that federal aid should be provided to California for as long as it takes?
Well, it's very sad because...
And we will get to, by the way, Gavin Newsom's response to Trump.
I've been trying to get Gavin Newsom to allow water to come. You'd have tremendous water up there. They send it out to the Pacific because they're trying to protect a tiny little fish, which is in other areas, by the way, called a smelt. And for the sake of a smelt, they have no water. They had no water in the fire hydrants today in Los Angeles. It was a terrible thing. And we're going to get that done. It's going to finally be done. I got it done from the federal side, and he didn't want to sign it, but it's not going to happen again like that. There's no reason. Can you imagine? You have farmers that don't have any water in California. They have plenty of water. They don't have a drought. They send it out to the Pacific, and it's crazy. So what's happening in California is a true tragedy. I know those areas very well. I have many friends living in those houses. That is a true tragedy. Nobody ever thought. I mean, virtually Beverly Hills and areas around Beverly Hills are being decimated. The biggest homes, some of the most valuable homes in the world.
By the way, as of this statement, Beverly Hills had not been hit.
Are just destroyed. I don't even know. You talk about a tax base. If those people leave, you're going to lose half your tax base of California. This is a true tragedy, and it's a mistake of the governor, and you could say the administration. They don't have any water. They didn't have water in the fire hydrants. They don't have water. And yet they have, the water comes from, where? Up north. And it comes down at levels, they give millions and millions of barrels of gallons of water that they have, and they send it out into the Pacific. For the Pacific, it's like a drop, it's nothing. But for California, it would take care of the whole state. So what's happened is a tragedy, and the governor has not done a good job. With that being said, I got along well with him when he was governor. We worked together very well, and we would work together. I guess it looks like we're going to be the one having to rebuild it. But what happened there, I don't think there's anything that I've ever seen quite like it. And the insurance companies are going to have a big problem, because you're talking about big, big dollars.
All right. I just want to make sure to emphasize as we go through this, this is not me asserting that we couldn't find, and we won't eventually learn, of something ineffective about the governance of local leaders, of Democrats here, there. Because with an event like this, in retrospect, we should actively try, as I'm knocking something on my desk, we should actively try to find where wrong decisions were made and how we could do better, how we can prevent crises like this, if possible, and then respond to more effectively. So there's going to be criticism, and we always want to do that, Republican or Democratic, whenever something like that happens. How can we be better? But that doesn't justify lying about circumstances. exploiting tragedies to do so. Before going through the specifics, here's Newsom's response.
You know, people are literally fleeing. People have lost their lives. Kids lost their schools. Families completely torn asunder. Churches burned down. This guy wanted to politicize it. I have a lot of thoughts, and I know what I want to say. I won't. I stood next to a president of the United States of America today, and I was proud to be with Joe Biden. And he had the backs of every single person in this community. He didn't play politics, didn't try to divide any of us.
Finally, your message to the folks here, to this community.
I mean, we have their backs, and we're going to be back. And this is going to be a long recovery process. But look, we have residents moving back into Paradise, California. I've seen remarkable recovery efforts. I've seen remarkable sense of community, purpose, resilience. So, I'm not just playing the politician role of optimism. I really am long-term optimistic. But the devastation to hear people wailing and crying, concerned about their pet, their family.
Yeah, it's just really, really heavy stuff, which makes it that much outrageous. What is being spread around. We'll get to the claims about the Los Angeles mayor, Karen Bass, and how even mainstream outlets jumped onto false narratives there as well. But first, to address some of what Trump said, you have LAist reporting on this. The fires burning in Los Angeles County were fanned by severe winds and exacerbated by near zero rainfall throughout Southern California, but sending more water south from Bay Delta would have done nothing to prevent them or extinguish them. As often happens, Trump's speaking in a jumbled way and doesn't give a lot of specifics, so it's a little bit of a guessing game, but this is seemingly what he was referring to. Mark Gold, Water Scarcity Director for the National Resources Defense Council and a board member of the Metropolitan Water District of Southern California, said Trump's comments do not reflect California's complex water supply system and just fan flames of political discontent. Quote, tying Bay Delta management into devastating wildfires that have cost people's lives and homes is nothing short of irresponsible. And it's happening at a time when the Metropolitan Water District has the most water stored in its system in the history of the agency. It's not a matter of having enough water coming from Northern California to put out a fire. It's about the continued devastating impacts of a changing climate. Talk more about that, by the way, in just a second. But you had a Fox contributor echoing Trump and saying he blames the voters for this.
By yelling out climate change. I heard Karen Bass right before the show. It's climate change. It's climate change. That's a lie. It's poor management on the part of the Democrats. They do not look at fire prevention, what you said, basic forestry as a priority. It's climate change. It's EV mandates. It's preventing oil drilling. It's DEI, that DEI, which is so sickening. What does DEI have to do with putting out fires? But you got a city fire chief who thinks DEI is the #1 issue. It's insulting. And you know what? I blame the voters and I blame the media here. Sean, you think the national media is biased? The local media in California kissed the ring of the Democrat Party.
He says, I blame the voters. That is one way. That is one way to approach speaking about people as their lives are being turned upside down. I blame them, and I blame the media, and I blame the Democrats as I echo false narratives. You had a MAGA account we talk about from time to time saying, Dear Californians, it doesn't have to be this way. Stop voting Democrat sincerely. Real Americans. It's natural to look to the people who are in power overseeing your jurisdiction whenever your community is impacted by a natural disaster. It makes sense that you would say, what could you have done better? What will you do better? What could your response be that will help us the most? In some cases, you couldn't have done things better, but it's totally natural to ask those questions. It's not natural to be this willing, to be this dishonest. And by the way, if there is a party that is actively, intentionally doing something that exacerbates these problems, it's the Republican Party. I'm sure you have unintentional neglect to certain things that could be done to mitigate even more. Rarely is governance perfect, so there's absolutely those details, I'm sure. But in terms of actively choosing to purposely block progress on something that then exacerbates crises like this, it's the Republican Party. Because this very wildfire and wildfires like it, they are being driven and exacerbated by climate change. Increasing temperatures and the prolonged droughts being those underlying conditions. And there are other things too. You heard him mention forest management and different prevention measures. True, but why are you ignoring that California has continued to increase investments in fire prevention and mitigation, including forest management programs, but climate conditions have outpaced those efforts, unfortunately. So maybe more effort needs to be made on those fronts and the climate change front. But doing this, they're neglecting the real problem by wanting to address the climate crisis means you're not wanting to look at the full problem. And in the process, making a lot of false claims. Another one, the Los Angeles mayor, Karen Bass, you heard that contributor mention her. She got caught up in a misinformation storm that even crept its way into huge mainstream outlets. The Los Angeles Times saying the mayor cut LA Fire Department's budget by $23 million. Politico finally came out. This morning, I ended up going and finding some of the specific documentation of the budget and was looking, thinking, this is not what I'm seeing being reported. Luckily, some of the outlets caught up. And by the time I sat down to record this, Politico had done a piece on this. That assertion is wrong. The city was in the process of negotiating a new contract with the fire department at the time the budget was being crafted. So additional funding for the department was set aside in a separate fund until that deal was finalized in November. In fact, the city's fire budget increased more than $50 million year over year compared to the last budget cycle. And so even that claim that's being made about LA Mayor Karen Bass does not seem to be correct. The backlash that she's received has also been related to her not being in town when the wildfire started. But now I'm seeing this one most prominently being discussed, that she defunded the fire department. It's just not true. Increased funding, as Politico notes. Why? On a few of the recent stories we've been doing, whether it be the New Orleans massacre, the Tesla Cybertruck bombing that took place outside of Trump International Hotel, whether it be even hurricanes some time ago, this story, we're preparing to do a little bit more on the Matthew Leibelsberger, who's related to that Cybertruck. I feel, as I prep this segment, so much of a burden to make sure I don't get a fact wrong, because you're talking about such a severe magnitude and people's lives. And this isn't just some nebulous political debate. These are people's homes, their lives, their communities, and then terrorist attacks in some of the cases I'm talking about. And so I just can't relate. I don't get it. How people go out and just blah, 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 and just say whatever, hoping that something is believed by people so they can get one little political jab in. Really unfortunate. Be better. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. If you do want to support the show, you can by clicking that join button below.